You've been in first place since the start of the race. You've hit every shortcut and drifted perfectly around every corner. The finish line is in sight. Nothing can stop you now. And then you hear it, the terrifying sound of a blue shell rushing through the air. You inch close to the finish line as the shell circles over you. You're a mere cart length away from the line when the blue shell hits you in a blue fiery explosion. You're immediately stopped. Your friend laughs as he screeches by you. You lose simply because you were in first place at the wrong time. If you've ever played Mario Kart, you've probably been in this situation. You know the feeling of fundamental unfairness. After all, you were in first place. You were the best racer, right? Why should you lose just because an item exists that specifically hurts racers who are doing the best? This is so frustrating, and the feeling sucks. So why have developers decided to keep the blue shell in every game of the series since its inception? And if the item is designed to hurt the most skilled players, then why do professional Mario Kart tournaments include the blue shell in their games? Not only are we going to answer these questions today, but we will also address how this explains the need for taxes and social programs, as well as how we can use the lessons learned from the blue shell to structure our society in a way that makes life better for everyone. When the original Mario Kart was released, the developers learned that the game had a major flaw. The game was at its most fun when racers were close together, needing to weave in between other racers, use items to slow them down, and dodge items being launched at them. However, the victory condition encouraged people to avoid this playstyle. The goal of winning the race incentivizes players to get out in front and avoid all that chaos that comes from items and other racers flying around all about them. In an attempt to win the game, players inadvertently make it less fun. To make matters worse, avoiding the scrum gives players a cumulative advantage that snowballs over time, creating a scenario where the players behind them may never be able to catch up, even if they're driving better. A couple of lucky draws at the beginning of the race could allow a racer to snowball a cumulative advantage so great that they're able to win despite playing suboptimally. And if that sounds like the inevitable result of a certain economic system to you, well, sit tight because we're going to get there soon. Not only does this make the game less fun for the players in the back who are never able to catch up, but it also makes the game less fun for the player in first. Just think about the games of Mario Kart where you've had the most fun. They're never the races where you're leading wire to wire. They're the ones where you're going back and forth with your friends and victory isn't determined until the very last second. To solve this problem, developers introduced the infamous blue shell. The item was designed so that it could slow down the racer in first, and in sequels, it was able to slow down a whole group in the front of the pack with a large blue explosion. This made the game more fun for everyone involved because it ensured the first place advantage couldn't continue to endlessly snowball, and it made sure that people spent more time playing the game in its most fun, most competitive state. The developers have always been well aware that the blue shell feels unfair when you get hit by it, but it makes the game so much more fun for everyone involved that they've never found a good reason to take it out. In an interview with Eurogamer, Kazuki Yabuki, director of both Mario Kart 7 and 8, had this to say about the blue shell. We're always experimenting with what new elements to introduce or what elements to be removed. We've tried, or we are trying, to see what the game's like without the blue shell. When we've experimented without the blue shell, actually it feels like something's missing, like there's something not quite enough in the game. So for now, we've kept it in. As you can see, no matter how unfair the blue shell feels at times, we are all better off for having it. Getting hit by the blue shell feels unlucky, but it's nothing more than an acknowledgement of the luck it took to get to first place in the first place. Humans have a bias toward remembering negative events more than positive ones, so when we get hit by a blue shell, it's only natural to curse the game for being unfair, completely forgetting that the reason we were in the lead to begin with is that we just happened to be invulnerable for an early lightning strike, and the players behind us had been too busy beating the crap out of each other in order to catch up to us as we cruised away unimpeded by the scrum behind. You see, the blue shell isn't an omen of bad luck. It's an acknowledgement that no matter how skilled the leader is, it took some luck for them to get to where they are. And some of that luck needs to be paid back into the system in order to keep the game competitive and fun for everyone. And contrary to popular belief, the blue shell doesn't actually punish success in a way that turns Mario Kart into some casual luck-based slot machine simulator devoid of skill and meritocracy. Despite a system that is so obviously designed to hurt those skilled enough to reach the front of the pack, pro Mario Kart racers still exist. The best players in the world win time and time again, because even with systems designed to mitigate the cumulative advantage of being more skilled, races are still usually won by those with the most skill. I bet you know before you start a game of Mario Kart with your friends who's going to win. The blue shell doesn't stop them from doing so, but it does make you more likely to play with them because you know you have a fighting chance. And when more people play a game, that means more people get better at the game, which means that more skill is required to stay on top of the world. If you're at all familiar with leftist politics, then you probably know where I'm going with this. Just like Mario Kart, our economy needs more blue shells in order to remain competitive, efficient, and beneficial to everyone. And this isn't just about fairness or doing the right thing, it's about doing the correct thing. Because the fact of the matter is, extreme wealth inequality as we have in most advanced economies today creates many inefficiencies that hold us back from achieving our full potential. One of the most obvious yet least talked about inefficiencies is called a savings glut. High-income earners have a tendency to spend a much smaller portion of their money than low-income earners. Eventually, people start making enough money that they just don't have enough hours in the day to reasonably spend it on. This should make intuitive sense when you consider that in order to actually obtain $1 billion on the median American salary, you'd have to work for over 14,000 years with zero expenses. There is no way a single person could possibly spend that kind of money. But the thing is, spending money is what drives our economy. It's what creates demand for goods and services, which in turn creates demand for jobs, which gives people more money to spend on more goods and services, and so on and so forth in a virtuous cycle. According to a study by Harvard University economists, the bottom 20% of income earners spend about 95% of their income, while the top 5% spend only 60%. So every dollar in the hands of a rich person is going to stimulate the economy less than every dollar in the hands of the average American. Of course, the dollar saved can still stimulate the economy in the form of investments. However, savings gluts cause a problem on the investment side of things as well. In a perfect economy, people would invest their money in the most efficient way possible by putting it into the companies most likely to achieve a regular and consistent growth. But if someone has too much money, the most efficient investments will often not be big enough to get their attention. For example, a popular local bakery might offer a high chance of doubling your money if you invest $10,000, but that's just not going to move the needle for someone whose portfolio fluctuates up and down millions of dollars every day, no matter how efficient the investment is. The return just isn't large enough to be worth the time it takes to find the opportunity and invest in it. Additionally, there are only so many places to efficiently invest large amounts of money, so when a person's wealth grows enough, they begin making riskier and riskier investments. Instead of putting their money in a profitable company that provides a stable source of jobs and productive capacity for our economy, they will look for bigger and bigger bets that will actually make a substantial impact on their wealth, trying to chase the next Amazon or Facebook before everyone knows about it. This is exactly what happened with the recent tech bubble burst. Billionaires were making major investments in companies that had no plan to even return a profit for the next decade. Their goal wasn't to make the best product, it was to grow as much as they could in order to attract larger and larger investors with a promise of massive payoffs when they became the next Google. This created a bubble, and like the housing bubble, the dot-com bubble, and the Dutch tulip bubble before it, it was always going to burst eventually. When it did, thousands of people lost their jobs, and several banks were shut down, putting the entire economy at risk of a collapse. Even worse is the opportunity cost of making these risky investments. The productive capacity of all those billions of dollars went up in smoke when those companies went under. Without the savings glut driving risky investments, it could have instead been invested in far less risky companies that actually grow the economy, like the popular local bakery we mentioned earlier. It's not just that every dollar in the hands of a rich person stimulates the economy less through consumption, it also produces less efficient economic growth when it is invested. Speaking about opportunity cost, let's talk about what we lose as a society when people simply do not have the resources they need to achieve their full potential. Imagine a game of Mario Kart without rubber banding comeback mechanics like blue shells and weighted item drops. Eventually, the cumulative advantage of players in the front would snowball so much that the players in the back would have no chance of catching up. In Mario Kart, this leads to less fun and less competitive games, with players in the back simply giving up on winning, eventually discouraging them from playing the game entirely. But in reality, this phenomenon could cost us unimaginable innovations, like the next Microsoft or the cure for cancer. If that seems hyperbolic, look no further than the story of Bill Gates, which you'll be familiar with if you've ever read Malcolm Gladwell's excellent book, Outliers. Bill Gates was obviously naturally talented with computers. However, it takes much more than talent to be as good with computers as Bill Gates. It takes thousands of hours of hard work and practice. However, at the time, it was very expensive to get that many hours on a computer, and Bill was extremely fortunate enough that his parents happened to have enough money to get him the practice he needed in order to be able to found Microsoft at just 21 years old. Bill Gates went on to revolutionize the way that people worked, creating an incalculable boost to productivity in every office across the world. But if Bill Gates happened to have been born into a poor family, he would have never had the resources he needed to get the thousands of hours of practice required to found Microsoft at such a young age. And the world would have been deprived of his innovations for years, quite literally slowing down the growth of every industry on the planet. Proponents of pure free market economics often point to the profit motive as a driver of innovation that incentivizes the Bill Gateses of the world to create innovative products that help billions of people. However, what they fail to acknowledge is that we limit the pool of potential Bill Gateses if we only give a small fraction of the population the resources they need to be innovative. How many great innovators have we lost out on because they took a job to help put food on the table as a teenager instead of getting the education they need? How many times has someone who had the raw talent to save millions of lives just given up and quit the game because they were born into poverty and couldn't afford to invest in their billion-dollar idea? Just like how being in first place in Mario Kart gives a game-breaking advantage without the blue shell, our economic system gives an unfair advantage to those with wealth. After all, it takes money to make money, and those who don't have money are forced to spend their time and energy simply surviving instead of being free to take risks, innovate, and thrive. To make matters worse, in America, about 50% of that economic advantage is passed on to the children of people with wealth, even though they were born with the same raw potential for greatness as those born into poverty. In order to realize the full human potential of our society, we need economic blue shells to give everyone a chance of winning the race. This includes things like universal healthcare, which would eliminate the #1 cause of bankruptcy in this country. Universal basic income, which would allow everyone and their children to live comfortably regardless of issues with job security. Free public college and trade school, so that everyone has equal access to higher education, not just those with parents wealthy enough to afford it. And much more progressive income, wealth, and inheritance taxes to help reduce savings gluts and provide the resources needed for the previously mentioned programs. Just like blue shells, these things may feel unfair to those people already in the lead, but nevertheless, they will make the economy work better for everyone, including those who are getting hit. We shouldn't just implement the shells because they are the right thing to do. We should implement them because they are the correct thing to do.